The rain pelted against the sheet metal roof and sloughed off in heaps, which pounded on the soaked concrete below. Thunder roared in the distance, but there was no lightning in sight. The air was cool, yet sharp in the way that only early fall can be, and it carried a metallic scent of rainfall. I was sitting on an old metal folding chair behind the pizza joint where I worked and scrolling through an endless Instagram feed. Freshly 16, I'd just been promoted from cashier to delivery driver not too long after getting my car. At first, I was excited. The idea of driving around, listening to music, and bringing pizzas to people sounded pretty good. But after a few months, the job lost a lot of its allure. It afforded me some spending money, though, and I liked the people I worked with, so I stuck it out. The back door of the building swung outward, and the head cook, Tony, poked his head through the gap. He was a late 40s man with a perfectly bald head who was proud of his Italian heritage. He'd never spent so much as a day of his life outside of Riverstone, Wisconsin, but he spoke with a Brooklyn accent like he'd just got off the boat in New York. "Hey, Mikey, we got another order. The boss says he wants you to take it," he said. I groaned and looked back at him. "Seriously? This late?" "Yup, and it's far out of town, too. They paid with a card, though, so boss says you can just head home when you're done." Okay. Thanks, Tony." "No problem." Tony dipped back into the kitchen, and I slouched back in my chair, looking up at the metal roof over my head. At least I get to go home afterwards, I thought. About 15 minutes later, I had a couple of large pizzas and a 2-liter of Pepsi loaded in the back of my car. I punched the address for the order into my phone and found the trip would be another 15 minutes. I hadn't taken a look at the map in the kitchen, but from the estimate alone, I knew this house had to be at the very edge of our delivery area. I sighed, queued up some music, and pulled out of the parking lot. The rows of houses and businesses slowly gave way to fields and trees. The headlights of my car cut through the darkness, but even with the high beams on, they did little to hold back the shadows. Raindrops reflected the light as they fell, which created a starry view within my small cone of vision. I would have enjoyed it more, were I not focused on watching for deer. Eventually, I turned off the main road and onto a weathered country road. I gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2 and kept my eyes scanning the foliage. I arrived at the house almost exactly when my phone had predicted I would. I pulled onto the long driveway and examined the house as I approached. It was a 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch on the left side. Its white paint was cracked and chipped, and the black trim around the windows was a faded, washed-out gray. The grass was overgrown and wild, threatening to overtake the driveway that was nothing more than a well-trodden path. Multiple cars were parked along the driveway. Most of them looked like junkers that hadn't moved in years. Were it not for the porch light outside and the lights shining inside, I would have thought the place abandoned. I pulled up as close to the front steps as I could, then got out to grab the pizzas and Pepsi. I half ran through the chilly rain, got to the door, and rang the doorbell. It worked, earning a small chuckle from me. I'd expected it to just fall off the wall when I pushed it. While I waited, a strong, musty odor hit my nostrils, and I took an instinctual half-step back from the door. Shuffling sounds came from inside, followed by footsteps approaching the door. They stopped on the other side of it, and a high-pitched male voice spoke. "Who is it?" he asked in a sing-song manner. It's the pizza guy," I said. "I got 2 large pepperonis and a 2-liter of Pepsi." "Ooh, excellent. Give me one moment, dear." The steps retreated from the door, and I was left standing there like an idiot. I had no idea why, on God's green earth, they'd stepped back from the door. Tony said they'd paid with a card, so all I had to do was give them the pizza and dip. A flash of lightning lit up my surroundings, followed closely by a loud boom of thunder. I turned to look at the sky from under the overhanging roof, and found the clouds to be pulsing with flashes. The rain grew more intense, and I began praying that the person would return soon so I could get going before it got too bad. I returned my gaze to the front door just as another bolt of lightning struck, followed by thunder that rumbled so violently the ground shook. At that same moment, all the lights in the house went out. Now drenched in darkness, I looked back to the sky once again. It was unchanged, yet more ominous all the same. "Excuse me," I shouted, turning to face the door again. "I can just leave the food out here if that's okay." No response. "Alright, I'm just gonna leave it out here next to the door," I shouted, and put the food down. As I straightened up, another flash of lightning lit the exterior of the house. It lasted about 2 seconds, but in that time, I saw something that made my heart stop. A shadow of a person projected on the wall in front of me. Every muscle in my body tensed, and my stomach wound itself into a ball. I turned around slowly. Behind me stood a man of average build who seemed to be around my height. He wore only 2 items of clothing, a pair of filthy, stained tighty-whities and a rubber bear mask. The eye holes in his mask were black voids. His arms were limp at his sides, and he stared up at me from the driveway with boredom, like a child looks at a painting. The rain rolled down his skin in rivulets, but he didn't seem bothered by the chill at all. We stared at one another for what felt like an eternity before music broke the silence. It emanated from inside the house, and it had a metallic echo to it, like it was coming from a genuine record player from the 30s or 40s. Then, the same man who'd come to the door earlier began to sing with the music. He didn't say anything, only crooned out notes to match the instrumental. The man in the bear mask perked up at the voice, like a dog when you ask if they want to go for a walk. He began to dance, moving with elegance and fluidity, almost like a ballerina. After a couple seconds, the front door swung open, pulled by a pale hand from inside. The man's voice grew clearer as the door opened fully and he revealed himself. He was dressed exactly as the bear man was, except the singer wore a bunny mask and had smeared a tuxedo on his chest in black paint. He emerged from the doorway and stared at me, not giving the other man any attention. Before he could step out onto the porch, instinct took over, and I turned to run down the patio, away from both men. I stopped in an instant when I saw a woman, dressed in a pair of white panties and bra, standing at the corner of the house. She wore a fox mask, with one hand on her hip, and the other reaching towards me, beckoning for a dance. I panicked, unsure where to go, then realized in a moment of clarity, I could hop the railing. That would put me close to the bear man, but if I hit the ground running, I could easily slip past him. The moment I leapt over the railing, I realized my mistake in the form of cool raindrops hitting my face. I hit the wet grass, and my feet slipped out from under me, causing me to land hard on my back and smash my head on the ground. Stars exploded in my vision, and everything went blurry. I shook my head and scrambled to my feet, but the bear man had already reached me. "Dance with me!" he wailed as he leapt onto my back and wrapped his arms around me. He picked me up with surprising ease and spun me around. I wriggled in his grip the best I could as nausea swelled in my stomach. Finally, I connected one good kick to his leg. A loud snap let me know I'd hit my mark. The man let me go, howling in pain. I hit the ground, now on my hands and knees, trying not to vomit. The woman on the patio screamed, and the man in the bunny mask continued to sing. I stumbled away, trying desperately to regain my balance and reach my car. I slammed into a nearby junker and leaned on it for a moment to steady myself. Just as my head began to settle, another flash of lightning lit up the world. In it, I saw dozens of masked people emerging between the junkers. 2 of them were crouched beside my own vehicle like cats waiting to pounce. With a shout that was a mixture of frustration and fear, I turned to run in the opposite direction, towards the woods. Through the rain and wind, I could make out the sounds of my pursuers. Twigs snapped and bushes rustled, but mostly I heard their howling. My only shot was to get back to the road I'd taken to the house. There, it'd be easier to move and I'd have a higher chance of running into another person. I set my direction towards where I hoped the road would be, and kept running. Thankfully, it wasn't too far, but I was still breathing hard by the time I reached the pavement. The things continued to screech and wail behind me, but I was making a much better pace now that I was unimpeded. I ran until my legs began to give. I had no idea how far I'd ran, but I knew that if I stopped, they'd catch up. Their hollering had grown distant, but I still heard it. One final idea occurred to me as my legs folded from underneath me. I stumbled to the left side of the road, then fell into the ditch. I rolled down the embankment and came to a rest in a pool of mud at the bottom. I got shakily to my knees and grabbed globs of the stuff, smearing it all over myself. Once I was fully covered, I laid down in the muck and faced the dark sky. Only a few minutes after my stumble, I heard the wails of my pursuers grow louder and louder. They were scattered, not quite unified in their direction. I hoped that meant they didn't know where I was, though they still moved toward me. Soon, I could hear their wet, slapping footsteps on the pavement to my left. Snapping twigs and rustling underbrush came from my right. They were going to pass right over me. I pulled my eyes shut and prayed. I prayed the mud hadn't washed off of me in the rain. I prayed for their masks to obscure their vision so they wouldn't see me. I prayed that the piss now running down my leg wouldn't give me away. I prayed to God to get me through this. It didn't take long for them to surround me. They howled, cackled, and whined like animals. Some growled. A few sniffed the air loudly, trying to catch my scent. I felt my heartbeat in my ears and fought the urge to run. Even if I thought I could get away now, my legs would not respond to any commands. Far down the road, the bunny man still sang, leading his pack forward. After a few agonizing minutes, I heard one of them yelp, and a herd of footsteps raced past my hiding spot, running back to their nest. When they were gone, I opened my eyes. The rain had died down significantly, and a few clouds had parted to reveal the stars behind them. I gazed at those specks of light like a man dying of hunger admires a ribeye. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. I wanted to sink into the earth fully and emerge on the other side of the planet, far away from all of this. A beam of yellowish light cut through the darkness, glistening on the soaked foliage overhead and chasing away the shadows. A car engine cut through the silence, and I sat upright. My back flourished with pain, and my legs felt 3 times their size with stiffness, but I managed to roll onto my stomach and claw my way upward. I moved slowly, seeing the light off to my left grow brighter and brighter, and hearing the engine grow louder and louder as the car approached. I screamed with everything I had, disregarding my pursuers completely, and dug my hands into the wet soil and pushed with my useless legs. I finally felt gravel with my hand, and began to cry as I waved frantically. The headlights rolled right past me. My vocal cords tore as my screams fell from hope to despair. I pounded my fist against the gravel beside the road and wailed until I felt a painful crack in my throat. Then, I only wheezed. Tears rolled down my cheeks and my hand dropped to the ground. After some time, my eyelids fluttered as exhaustion moved in where the adrenaline had been. I didn't want to sleep, but my panicking brain was being overruled by my worn-out body. I tried to look up at the stars one last time, but couldn't turn my head. Darkness swallowed me. I don't remember dreaming. All I recall from my time unconscious was a vague sense of weightlessness, like I was floating in lukewarm water. I could breathe just fine, but couldn't open my eyes. My ears cut in and out like a busted radio. All they picked up was the wind and rustling leaves. It was nice there. All my pain was gone, and my thoughts flowed like a steady stream. I could have stayed there forever. When my body shifted and I felt weight return to it, though, I knew it was time. Time to return to reality and face whatever it had in store. The first thing I felt was the soft bed I rested on. Then, I felt a snugness along my right shin, left forearm, and around my head. Next came the blanket which rested over my body, and finally, the cool air of my hospital room. Though muffled by the bandages around my head, I could hear the steady beeps of the heart monitor to my right. My eyelids weighed 1,000,000 pounds, but I tried hard to pull them apart anyway. It took some time, but I did open them. I was laid up in a bed with a white blanket thrown over my body. Tubes protruded from my arms, and a pulse monitor was clipped to my right index finger. The room was dim, but not dark. The walls were a light green color, with a cream trim near the floor. A TV was mounted in front of me, but it was off. To my left, my mother was sitting on a couch and looking at her phone. The shades were pulled on the window behind her, and I could see daylight creeping in around the edges. I tried to speak, but it only came out in a choked groan. My mother looked up as soon as I made a sound. She went to get a nurse when she saw my eyes were open. Not long after, my doctor, Dr. Choi, came into my room and examined me himself. When he was sure that I was doing fine, relatively speaking, He filled the gaps in my memory and explained the extent of my injuries to me. When I failed to return home at my usual time, my parents called the pizzeria looking for me. Luckily, Tony was staying late to work on prep for the next day and answered the phone. When it became clear that no one knew where I was, they began to look for me. My parents would drive around town, and Tony would drive to the address of my last delivery. Tony would tell me later that he only saw me on the side of the road because a couple of coyotes had gathered around me, and one was gnawing on my arm. They scattered when he pulled up in his truck, and Tony rushed to my side. He realized right away that I was still breathing, but barely, and loaded me up in his truck to race to the hospital. "You were quite the mess when you came in," Dr. Choi said. "Caked in dry mud and dripping with blood. Gave us quite the scare. We started by getting you clean so we could properly assess your injuries. We determined pretty quickly that you had a minor concussion and lacerations across your body." He gestured to the bandages on my arm, leg, and head. He went on to explain the rest of my treatment, which included infection prevention and rabies testing. Due to a mix of exhaustion and medication, I'd been unconscious for a few days. "You'll have to stay a few more nights so we can monitor you," Dr. Choi concluded, "but your tests are promising." The weeks which followed were some of the busiest in my life. When I was able, I asked the hospital to contact the police for me. That same day, a pair of officers visited my room, and I told them everything I could about the house and masked people. Of course, they went to the house after getting my statement. My car was still parked out front, though all 4 tires had been punctured and were flat. The house itself was completely abandoned, apart from an old record player which had been left on a dilapidated table in the dining room. It was the only thing in the home not covered in a fine layer of dust. Still, as far as the investigators were concerned, nobody had stayed there for decades. Once the doctors cleared me physically, I was discharged and sent home. I went back to school after another week of recovering at home, quit my job at the pizza place, started seeing a therapist, and then did a few interviews with various magazines and papers. Mostly, people wanted to know my story, what had happened to me, how I'd survived, what I thought was going on in that house, etc. I gave them the answers they wanted, but I never lied. There is one detail I've left out in all my retellings, however. One small thing Dr. Choi told me while my mother was out of the room. The wounds on my body were bite marks, a fact which lines up with Tony's story of finding me. So, the ER staff assumed they were from animals chewing on me. As they cleaned and dressed them, however, a nurse noted that the wound on my right ear was different from those on my arm and leg. Upon closer examination, they determined the wound on my ear had been made not by an animal, but by a human.